Security cameras caught everything, except the moment Tom Hayes whispered something to the attacker that made him freeze in terror. When reporters tried to find out what he said, they discovered something that shocked the entire town. This is the story of a quiet security guard whose past held secrets that would change how a community saw courage forever. If this story moves you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes heroes walk among us every day. Tom Hayes had been working security at Miller's Market for 3 years. At 45, he was the kind of man people looked through rather than at. Average height, graying beard, navy blue uniform that had seen better days. He arrived every morning at 6 a.m. and took his position by the front doors. Most customers didn't notice him. He preferred it that way. Tom's routine was simple and unchanging. He checked receipts with polite efficiency, helped elderly customers with heavy bags, and occasionally reminded teenagers that skateboarding wasn't allowed. The other employees knew almost nothing about him. He lived alone, no family visited, no friends called during breaks. When asked about his weekend plans, Tom would smile slightly and say he kept busy. What they didn't know was that Tom Hayes chose Miller's Market very carefully. Not for the pay, $12 an hour was hardly enough to live on. He chose it because Miller's Market sat directly across from Riverside Elementary School. Every morning at 7:30, children walked past his window. Every afternoon at 3:15, they passed again heading home. Tom knew their faces, their routines, their safe routes. He watched over them from behind glass doors, a guardian they never knew they had. The day everything changed started like any other. Tuesday morning, October 15th, 8:47 a.m. Tom noticed something that made his stomach tighten. A man in his 30s paced near the school crosswalk, checking his watch repeatedly. Dark clothing, nervous energy, hands reaching into his jacket pockets. Tom had learned to read body language in places where reading it wrong meant death. Tom stepped outside to get a better angle. The man was positioned between two parked cars, watching the school with intense focus. Children were gathering for morning recess in the playground across the street. Tom reached for his radio, but before he could speak, the man moved. He crossed the street with sudden purpose, pulling something from his jacket. A large knife, its blade catching the morning sun. Tom's training kicked in before his conscious mind could process what was happening. 25 years earlier, he had earned his place in the Army's most elite units. Ranger School. Special Operations. 3 tours in Iraq. The skills were muscle memory now: assess, act, neutralize. The man was heading straight for a group of children playing near the school fence. Tom sprinted across the parking lot, vaulting over a low concrete barrier. The attacker reached the children first. He grabbed a 7-year-old girl, the knife raised. Tom arrived 3 seconds later. What happened next unfolded in a blur of controlled violence that shocked the witnesses but felt familiar to Tom. He struck pressure points learned in military combat training, applied holds that disabled without permanent damage, and had the attacker on the ground in less than 30 seconds. But it was what came next that would haunt the attacker for years. As Tom held him down, waiting for police, he leaned close and whispered something in the man's ear. The attacker's eyes went wide with terror, not from physical pain, but from whatever Tom had said. He stopped struggling completely, his body going limp with absolute horror. The security cameras from Miller's Market captured the takedown, but they couldn't capture audio from across the street. They couldn't record the words that made a violent man freeze in absolute fear. Police arrived within minutes. The attacker was taken into custody, strangely docile and refusing to speak. Tom gave his statement quietly and tried to return to work as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Local news picked up the story by evening. Store security guard stops knife attack on school children. The footage was dramatic, Tom moving with precision and speed that seemed impossible for a quiet middle-aged man in a rent-a-cop uniform. The community wanted to know more about their unexpected hero. Reporter Sarah Martinez from Channel 7 News was the first to dig deeper. She started with basic questions about Tom's background and military service. The answers led to more questions. Then phone calls to Pentagon records offices that required security clearances she didn't have. Tom Hayes wasn't just a veteran. His military file was heavily redacted, filled with classified missions and commendations that couldn't be discussed publicly. Through persistent investigation and off-the-record conversations with retired military contacts, Sarah pieced together a picture that stunned her. Tom Hayes had been Staff Sergeant Thomas Hayes, 75th Ranger Regiment, with deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. He'd served in classified operations that saved American lives. He'd earned a Purple Heart after taking shrapnel while defending a school in Kandahar from Taliban fighters. The attack happened when insurgents targeted a girls' school. Tom and his unit held their position for 6 hours under heavy fire, ensuring every child made it to safety. He carried 3 wounded Afghan children to the evacuation zone himself, despite bleeding from shrapnel wounds. When Sarah finally reached a retired colonel who served with Tom, the man's voice grew heavy with respect. Tom Hayes saved more lives than most people will ever know. He had this thing about protecting kids especially. After what he saw over there, it became personal. When he came home, he struggled with PTSD. He wanted to serve but couldn't handle regular police work. He needed something quieter, but still meaningful. Sarah's investigation revealed that Tom had specifically requested assignment to Miller's Market because of its location near the school. For 3 years, he'd been an unofficial guardian, watching over children who never knew they needed protection. As news of Tom's background spread, the community's response was overwhelming. Parents who had walked past him for years now stopped to thank him. The mayor announced plans for a ceremony honoring his service. But Tom Hayes remained unchanged. He still arrived at 6 a.m., still took his position by the doors, still watched over the school. When asked by reporters about the whispered words that terrified his attacker, Tom's answer was simple and chilling. I told him what happens to people who hurt children in my presence. Some lessons are better learned through fear than pain. The attacker, later identified as David Morrison, eventually spoke to investigators. Through tears, he described how Tom's whispered words painted a picture of consequences so specific and terrifying that violence seemed preferable to what awaited him if he ever came near children again. Morrison entered a guilty plea and requested maximum security prison placement, citing fears he couldn't articulate. Tom's story spread beyond the local community. Military veterans across the country recognized something familiar in his measured competence under pressure. The most telling response came from Riverside Elementary School itself. The principal approached Tom personally with a request. The school board wanted to offer him a position as head of security. Better pay, benefits, official recognition of his role protecting their children. Tom considered the offer carefully. After 3 days, he declined politely. His reason was simple but profound. The children feel safer when protection doesn't look like protection. The moment I become official security, I become a reminder that danger exists. Right now, I'm just the quiet man who waves at them through the window. That's how it should stay. 6 months after the incident, Tom Hayes continues his routine at Miller's Market. Customers still barely notice him. He still arrives early, still watches the school, still keeps his past largely to himself. But now the community knows what they have, a guardian who chose to serve in silence. The knife attack never made national news. Tom Hayes never sought publicity. But in one small town, people sleep a little easier knowing that sometimes heroes choose to hide in plain sight. The lesson of Tom Hayes isn't about combat skills or military training. It's about the choice to serve without recognition, to protect without praise, to stand guard in the shadows while others live in the light. In a world that often mistakes noise for strength, Tom chose the quiet power of presence. Stories like this remind us that courage doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it works the night shift, wears a simple uniform, and asks for nothing more than the chance to keep making a difference. Heroes walk among us every day. We just don't always recognize them until the moment they step forward. Have you ever noticed the quiet guardians in your own community? The people who serve without seeking credit, who protect without asking for praise. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that true strength often works in silence. Because sometimes, the most important heroes are the ones nobody sees coming. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.